Hello, everyone, and welcome to another interview session with Global Conservation Force. Tonight, I'm happy to have Lauren Lee joining me, who is the GCF project coordinator for our education outreach projects. And most notably, what we're currently running right now is our wildlife education program in Vietnam with our partner Wild Hand. And so Lauren has been with the team for several years. And so tonight we'll get to know Lauren, how she works with the team, and what we're doing with education outreach, how we fund it, and how we plan to move forward in the future. Thanks for joining me, Lauren.
Perfect. Hi, guys. Like Mike said, my name is Lauren Lee. I'm the education project coordinator. I've been with GCF for a few years now, but basically a little bit about myself. I'm an educator, an informal educator, and I joined Global Conservation Force a few years ago, about 3 years ago now. Time flies. But I've been an informal educator for quite a while. So being in this field and teaching kids, teaching adults, teaching all audiences about conservation is my strong suit. So joining this role was pretty special and unique and inspiring to me. And that's how I started with GCF. But just to let you guys know about the background of this talk, we will have it recorded if you guys cannot stay through the whole thing. That way you guys can go resume back and visit it and see what we did cover in our little talk here today.
Yeah, and to that point, when you guys comment, we'll hold off on answering those questions towards the end. But like Lauren said, this will be broadcasted and saved. So it will stay on Facebook. It will go to our YouTube channel, and we'll plan to post it later on our Instagram. So if you have questions, don't be shy. Go ahead and drop them in the comments thread, and we'll be sure we answer them by the end of the session. In the meantime, we can kind of loop back again. So Lauren's been on the team. She works dedicated within the core GCF operation team as a project coordinator. So Lauren, maybe tell them a little more about your background, what your degree is, what inspired you to work with wildlife conservation and wildlife in general, and you know, how you feel you're using your skill sets to I guess push forward for the next generation.
Yeah, all good questions. Well, I started with GCF a few years ago, and I started by just first attending all the fundraisers. Aside from the COVID time, we usually have in-person fundraisers where you can meet the team in person. You can meet us virtually now too, but I used to go to all the fundraisers that we would host, from brewery outings all the way down to our galas. And then I thought, how in the world can I hang out with this team more and do more in the conservation field? Because these people were so inspiring to me. And I mean, drinking beer and talking about conservation is a great thing to do. So I figured, I found my tribe. And after about a year, I decided to, talk to Mike about the education coordinator role, given my background, which is in informal education in a conservation zoological facility. And I figured, this would be a perfect opportunity for me. So using my skills as an informal educator, I have applied that to our education projects that we are creating and that we are currently running in Vietnam and in Africa. And we can get a little bit more into that later. But I find it a nice, challenging, I guess, thing in my life where I can tailor all the information that I know about animals, because we're all kind of animal nuts, and figure out how to inspire the next generation of kids to get them to join our cause, because the more people we have in conservation, the better for all of our projects in the end.
100%. Well said. So kind of in coming up to speed now, since you've been on the team, I know you've helped Weston, who's our African painted dog project coordinator, on development stuff. You've helped us with some of our rhino education in Indonesia with the school projects that are just outside of Ujung Kulon National Park with digital learning and quizzes. And then, kind of a wide spectrum of things, again, using your background for that real interpretive education, not that, I guess, high school or
right.
College level science boring. Not to say that science is boring for everyone, but, if you're dealing with kids and young adults, you've got to make it engaging. So you've done a fantastic job taking content that's sometimes hard to listen to and hard to pay attention to, and adapted it to multiple cultures and age groups, and taken, really dense educational content and made it something that kids can actually walk away with really understanding after a program.
Sure. Yeah, like you mentioned, science isn't always easy to swallow when you're just sitting in a classroom, especially if you can't engage in it yourself and create your own experience and see, what it means to you to build that foundation to carry on the science and conservation and whatnot. Um, I've been working on a few projects like you had mentioned. I take anything that comes my way because there's always so many things to do and so many ways that you can help. But through my job, I was actually certified as a nationally, certified interpreter. And if for those of you that do not know what an interpreter is, it's basically an educator in an informal setting that utilizes the surroundings and interprets what they see to make it more engaging for a kid. So our programs are also tailored that way, our education programs. For instance, our education program in Vietnam called Veale is created to be extremely engaging to kids, where we play lots of games when we teach our lessons, and it's comprised of many field trips. And if you guys reflect back into middle school, elementary school days, who in the world doesn't like a whole day full of games and lessons and field trips, right? Those are the experiences that you remember most. And with those experiences, you can formulate a bigger, wider perspective and how you can help. And that's how we are going to create environmental stewards. That's what we're doing right now for all of our kids. So we are currently focusing on our program in Vietnam, which is really great. They're doing great, almost wrapped up now in the second year. The Indonesian project with teaching kids about rhinos, we spoke a lot with the teacher about what she wanted. So we tailored every single program and class to the kids so that it was more applicable to what they were learning. And then more so just creating things throughout the year. We do so many things in GCF that sometimes it's hard to keep track of all the details and progress and successes that we've made. So creating infographics to not only, share information with the team because we're pulled in so many directions, but also share information with all of our audience and supporters and how they have helped us. Because in the end, that's how we are able to proceed and do all of these great projects throughout the year. So all the infographics, tons of banners, information, talks like this to engage people is how we continue to make sure that people are completely up to date and we stay transparent in what we're doing.
100%. I mean, so that kind of like ties back into, so like, I know in some of the other conversations that the project coordinators hopped on, so you guys earlier in the week, if you saw, you met Sally and Rox, and, I hopped on last week. I was talking about stuff in What Does the Draft Say media interview. And then, kind of there are thousands of ways to approach conservation, and there are the real solid impact ways, and there's like the grassroots ways, which we tend to be very heavy in the grassroots of all of them. So we're hands-on in anti-poaching, ranger training, ranger gear supply, conservation education, this program development. And what we find all the time is, when we're working with a partner or we're starting our own project, we take the time to listen and learn to understand what the problems are in each area, so then we can customize and adapt. Again, learning from those regions to understand the best approach. And then we're also working with like in the case of our partners, where we have local educators understanding what their curriculum is and their actual goal in the year, and then embedding a custom course with wildlife and conservation in it so that we can further everything. But then comically, when we have literally hundreds of projects running throughout the year and there are programs going on in multiple countries at the same time, how to make sense of that and share it so it's just not like word vomit all the time, and it like just a ticker tape of things happening. And so that's where, like, Lauren, you work with I know you've worked with Roxanne on information, you've worked with Sally, you've worked with Weston, obviously your own projects,
Right.
Lauren Ayres in the Pangolin project coordination side, our canines. I mean, you've helped with multiple avenues in the nonprofit, because there's always a need to better translate that information or share it again in another format that's like more engaging, right? So
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is pretty cool, because I mean, again, sometimes it's hard to share, sometimes it's difficult to make a comprehensive kind of understanding in a short social media post.
Yeah.
And other times it's, the long run. So like the Vietnam project with Wild Hand and the Wild Warriors team. So that's a multiple month long course. It's this year it's what, 70 students?
Yeah, roughly.
Yeah.
And then, from that, they're going home to their parents, and they're the ones that are spreading this information far beyond. A lot of the time, the kids are our intel. They tell us everything that's happening in the fields, whether or not they know they're giving us that information. They
Yeah,
will
they'll share like, hey,
great.
this is a problem, and then we're like, shoot, we need to help tackle that in that local area too.
Exactly.
And yeah, and like the Vietnam project, especially, that's a long-term, long goal type thing, creating wildlife guardians in the home pressure range for one of the biggest demand markets for wildlife products. These kids are their own torch runners for conservation after they've learned all this cool new stuff, gone on all these field trips, gone to wildlife rehab facilities, and then they decide that they're going to become, a scientist, a veterinarian, a researcher, or they just care about animals and want to help, and they're going to help change the tide of some of the pressures in their own community that are causing poaching abroad or locally.
Yeah, so we're seeing that change already in the kids and how they respond to all the classes. At the end of each class, the students or the facilitators will usually ask the kids to write down and reflect on what they took away from the class. So getting to see that is really cool. There's just so many ways that we can impact these kids, but once we hook them with fun classes, man, they just take off. There's some seriously memorable incidences that I've had when I went out to Vietnam with these kids. Definitely a once in a lifetime experience for me. I've been teaching here in California for quite a long time, but in a hotspot, in a demand hotspot, it is quite different. Sometimes it's hard to stomach the information that you hear, but it's incredibly important to be aware of that stuff. One of my most memorable experiences was when we were in a class. We're talking about bear bile. And for those of you that don't know why bear bile is an issue within conservation, some bears are usually farmed for what's called bile, natural product in the body, where people use it medicinally. It's been known to dissolve gallbladder, stones and whatnot, but there are tons of synthetic alternatives for this particular resource. So when we were talking to the kids about this particular issue, the facilitators basically asked the kids to stand up if they had ever used it or had ever heard about it. And believe it or not, 50% of the kids stood up. And this is something I'd never seen before, now that we're currently in a serious hotspot. And just taking this all in it was a lot for me to see. But what was great was we had the ability to give these kids then a synthetic alternative. Right at that point, we gave them a synthetic botanic alternative, and they all took it home super stoked to share it with their families. And just like that, we changed a couple lives of both people and hundreds of bears. Who knows? So that's pretty cool.
Kind of also important there is how normal that came to them to share that.
Absolutely.
I know you guys weren't in the classroom setting trying to make anyone, feel shamed or anything for that, because you're trying to understand, I guess, the context of the use of that in that culture. But what comes out of that, which is a little more, I guess, eye-opening and everything, is the fact that, they're like, oh, that's me. Or like, what, how many of your parents have used pangolin parts and they put their hand up? Mm-hmm. Or how many of your parents enjoy shark fin soup and they put their hand up?
And a lot of issues just not knowing why it's an issue. Exactly. Not even knowing where it comes from. So getting to teach kids from start to finish what a bear is, what bile is, why we think this helps, and what we can do to make it better. Seeing that come full circle is it's very impactful, and it changes the lives of these kids, the community. It has a huge effect in the end.
And you guys did some really cool games that kind of, I guess, help them understand, like, also why even someone who would say like, oh, bear bile is farmed in a non-harmful way. You guys had the box games, and you had the things where like it showed kids like, no, even if someone's telling you that the bear isn't killed, or in the case we've heard in Vietnam as well, some believe that rhinos aren't killed for their horns, or they believe that ivory is only picked up off of dead elephants. When they're told the actual information and it comes to them in a real classroom setting, you see the horror and the shock and the desired change. Because uh, the lack of knowledge or the lack of expanse of the knowledge, just by cultural and language lines, you know, I think it's important for people to understand that like that's a huge problem on that side as well. Which there are many NGOs working on information and education, but these are countries, giant countries of rural communities and different cultures and different languages, and so there's a lot of time and effort that has to go in to kind of reach all the audiences you need to, not only to cut the demand, but then tackle the law enforcement and the conservation pressures themselves, and really work through all the different avenues. And again, like you said, at the end of these classroom days, you have these kids walk away super excited about this new information that they have to help save species and help protect the future of them. And they themselves become the wild warriors. They themselves become the future of conservation, because obviously you and I aren't going to be around forever. And so we need to figure out the generational torch pass on. And we also need to have more conservationists active in their own home ranges and their own national parks and their own national forests, so they can be the exponential growth of what our reach is.
Yeah, absolutely. By starting at the foundation, the whole grassroots approach, you're creating a further impact that'll hopefully resonate long term. And that is what we need in conservation. It's not a short-lived thing. This is a huge issue. And this is a super cheesy quote, but this is something that I always think about when we're teaching. In the end, we only conserve what we love. We only love what we understand, and we will understand what we're taught. Yep. We can't blame these kids for simply not knowing that this even exists or it's an issue. So by exposing the issue in a fun way where they're receptive, you hook them, you give them the alternative, you send them home. And then from that on, you start the chain reaction. And it's really cool to see that. It's also cool to see that our first Wild Hand program from last year has expanded into a second year. Like yes. None of us expected that to happen.
Yeah. I remember when we were first taking those meetings with Chow and trying to figure out how we could lay out this program. And first of all, so I guess we could back up a second. How did we even start this program?
There's just so much to cover. I know.
Yeah. So like
this program.
So Chow had reached out to myself, and then we were talking about expanding different projects. And I said, hey, maybe we could work on this, talk to Lauren. And so Lauren, maybe explain how Chow and his team got started, and then how we connected that dot, because that was crucial in being physically embedded in Vietnam with our own like full force education team there.
Yeah, it's such a great opportunity. So starting all the way back from the beginning, the Wild Warriors Project was started 2 years ago by the founder Chow in Vietnam. And just like us, I mean, they're so similar to us. It's a group of volunteers that just had this huge passion for conservation, and they wanted to do some kind of education project to make a bigger impact. So all the volunteers within Wild Hand is comprised of 10 core members who dedicate their time to create all these demand reduction projects in Vietnam to local kids. And what we mean by demand reduction programs is basically bringing awareness to a hotspot of wildlife trafficking, right? We want to make sure that we can reverse the damage that is done and fix the foundation to hopefully push them down the right path. So by exposing the issue, we aim to influence the foundation, basically. And the way we got connected, like Mike said, was through Chow. He found Mike on Facebook, and then this whole beautiful project started, which was awesome. And, it's gone up from there. They continue to be extremely driven, which is great to see. And they have so much support, not only from the local communities and the students and the families, but the local Vietnam news stations found them right after the program had ended. And they got so much support from that we started a second year for older kids. Now this year we're focusing on middle schoolers, whereas last year we focused on elementary. So it's just great to see how this program is growing. And they're just gaining more momentum as we go, and as we learn, and as we edit and tailor our techniques to make the biggest impact for these kids. To give you a little bit of an idea of how crazy unique this project is too, this is a completely volunteer run project. It takes place on a Saturday, these classes. These kids come for free, basically, on their own will, and they learn about conservation. So it's a
for
great
for 3 months.
for three
So
months.
it's like
On
not
Saturday.
like, oh, I just gave up a Saturday or 2 Saturdays.
Mhm. But they love it. Man, I've never seen students so darn enthusiastic in my life. They participate in all the games. It's constant screaming and yelling. They're extremely engaged. And meanwhile, whether or not they know, they're learning all these little facts that we're just weaving in the whole entire time. And by the end, they have all of these great things in their toolkit when it comes to conservation and how they can change and be part of our mission.
I think too, what's really fun with this one is, I mean, so Southeast Asia is a hotspot for wildlife trafficking, wildlife crimes, tourist trap-based issues, and um, this course covers all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about rhino horn, pangolin, ivory, bear bile, shark fin, those core species that we know about. It goes back into illegal pet trade. It goes into immoral tourist traps. It goes over into how to be a steward for your national parks, how to be an ambassador for wildlife and conservation in the public setting, and all these different variants. So at the end, it's not just like they learned about 5 species. They learned about, like last week, they were learning about like leatherback sea turtles and trash and recycling and the impacts of pollution and coastal development. But I mean, like, they become content experts in these, each habitat and environment or negative impact happening with large groups of species across different zones. And like you said, when we first started this and you went out and you worked with the Wild Hand team and the Wild Warriors project kicked off, and then we, had you embedded for the first section of the courses there. And then we planned to send you back out this year, and then the world just shut down on everybody.
Social media.
Thank you. Luckily, with all the tech we have now, we could stay connected and keep modules running and communication running. And but I guess what's most exciting is, so education, hands down, is the most difficult thing for us to fundraise for. It's not flashy. It's not exciting to the general public. You share posts about it, it gets very little engagement. And we all sit back and go like, how does this not excite people? How is this not a big thing? But then when the people that are passionate about the full circle and the understanding conservation education, those people are very passionate, which is really refreshing, and they step forward to support. Yeah. And we were really lucky because Lauren actually wrote a grant several months ago, and this year has been really terrible for fundraising. But Lauren locked in a grant that was granted by the Vista United Methodist Church, and they funded our entire program for next year, which was like huge. Yeah. I mean, rarely do you land a grant that's gonna, one, be like just allow you to set the pace for next year, but like we're gonna set and maintain next year's pace, which is really exciting because we already know next year is going to be equally as hard to fundraise for. So it's really, really cool to, have that kind of backing from our San Diego community. And, funding comes in from all over the place, but, to have national and international support for our international projects, it's always great. And so I think that's probably the most exciting factor that we have for the tail end of this year is this project is funded for 2021, its expansion and its operations to maintain, the next set of kids and students getting 3 full months of dedicated wildlife conservation education.
Yeah, it's so exciting. I mean, the more that we're able to reach when it comes to education, the bigger impact we're going to make. And it's obviously proven itself so far with the responses through the Vietnam news and through our students themselves and through grants like this. Obviously, people believe in us. Whether or not it's flashy, it's definitely important, and it's definitely taken off like a rocket, which is great to see.
It has.
That we needed.
It's like, it's so cool. I mean, fundraising is like that. It's always difficult. It's always a challenge. It's always a mission. But when we can take on like the grant, okay, boom. Now next year, we're not just doing this. What more can we do on top of this? how do we expand it, where do we expand it, and that time, all of a sudden, hours of time comes back to us where we can dedicate our focus on more conservation projects.
Right. And we've done this already twice before. So now we know how to use our money wisely, how to make the biggest difference for all these kids and make the lessons go real far. The team is super innovative with all the stuff they do too. I mean, Mike briefly talked about the bear box, and what he was talking about is literally a cardboard box that we had found the size of a cage that a sun bear would be in. And we utilize that as one of our tools. And the team just does not let anything take them down. This year, they had a couple of great field trips planned at the end of the program to wrap up everything the kids had learned so they can utilize the information in real time. And they were rained out. They were shut down because of COVID, but that did not stop them. They just had another lesson, and the kids were totally happy with games inside. And, you know, nothing seems to stop this program, which is really great to hear, especially now.
Yeah, it's man, it is funny because like this year you're just like, okay, what next? What next is gonna happen? And so obviously we hear like they got rained out. It was like monsoon rain that was like torrential downpours
in California. We're in Vietnam here in the rainforest.
Yeah. And so like, and it's like, okay, well, the field trip will get rescheduled. Okay, well, it's not a big deal. You know, it's like, you know, these things that come into play and we're like, oh, that's not that big of a deal this time. Luckily it's going to move through. But I know, so like with all these projects, I mean, for you, outside of that, the use of bear bile, was there another moment in all of this that, like, you really felt like, wow, like we're making progress, we're in it, like here it is, like I'm seeing like start to finish, like my fundraising connectivity to field connectivity, like it's all here. Like I see this life cycle.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so many things. It's hard to pick one. It's like picking a favorite kid. I would say, you know, just the responses at the end. Like I mentioned, we did not expect this to go on a second year. So imagine hearing at the very end, you have the news stations coming out, you have all these people reaching out, like Dr. William Folds coming to talk to these kids as well. Different organizations like Three Monkeys in Vietnam is another charity that has joined in on the cause to help support these volunteers. Just seeing people come almost out of the woodworks, but I know they were always there, is so great.
Did we lose you, Lauren?
Can you hear me?
We might have lost Lauren temporarily. Hold on, it's restarting. I think we lost you there for a second. You said the news station's reaching out, Dr. William Folds, and then Three Monkeys Media. Is that what it was?
Three Monkeys, it's a charity in Vietnam. Just seeing people come together after seeing the success of this project and gaining momentum that fast was something that I had never seen happen that quickly before. So that was really inspiring to see, just people come together, especially for a team that's completely new and that did a program relatively small. To get this much attention and then get funded again and again is extremely meaningful. We, you know, when we were in Vietnam, not Japan, different area. We had a couple of issues when it came to transporting all of our volunteers all the way to the rural school that we were going to, which was pretty darn far. I mean, we were awake at like 3 a.m, moving cardboard boxes on motorcycles all the way down to a national forest. Seeing everybody just do that, totally happy and content and driven, was pretty awe-inspiring. I mean, it was not an easy task. And then wrangling 70 plus kids, you know, for all of us. We're informal educators, you know, it's not like we had all the formal education training in like a lot of teachers do. We handled it completely fine, but it was really cool to see everybody come together and just adjust the way that we needed to immediately. You know, the kids responded well too. So just seeing the way it all played out was completely different.
All the field throws you that you're just like, oh, what's next?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it was great. It was great. There's a lot of things that were memorable about that experience.
Well, it looks like we've got a handful of people on. Maybe we could start taking questions from everybody.
Yeah, throw them at us.
So if anybody's got questions, we've got a lot of very nice comments in there.
Oh, thanks, guys.
Thank you all. We can see those, and we greatly appreciate your support. I saw that Chow was on for a second there too.
Oh,
yeah, he was able to stop in and say hi.
Well, that's great. Shout out to Chow, everybody.
Yeah. Well, I think really in the meantime, if people don't know, you can follow us on Instagram and on YouTube, as well as Twitter. Of course, you're probably watching this on Facebook right now. I see everybody is tuned in from Facebook. Um, if you guys didn't know, we're hosting our kind of closeout for 2020 fundraiser. It's shareable on Facebook. Of course, with holiday shopping, if anybody is looking for a last minute, it won't arrive by Christmas, maybe by New Year's, if you guys are able to get it over the weekend. Of course, if you guys have any upcoming birthdays, you can always select GCF for that, or you can select us on Amazon Smile. And if you at any time are looking to learn more about our projects, you can always reach out to us if the information isn't hosted online, which most of it is. If you go to our website, globalconservationforce.org, we have news and updates about the projects. Of course, we've got the host links as well. And if there's stuff that you really want to connect more with, we can always set you up to talk with one of our conservation coordinators, so that you can really understand what's coming next. Like we said, next year we've got we're going to continue our Wild Warriors project. We'll be working with our Nourish partnership and our other community partnerships in Southern Africa to maintain and expand our education outreach and game drives for kids there. And we have, let's see, Lauren Ayers is working on a activity book, as well as I know you guys just wrapped up the one helping Painted Dog Research Trust, right?
Yeah, we did one for Dr. Greg Rasmussen, which is pretty cool, on painted dogs. So a huge, collection of activities for kids to do. And once again, engaging them in a fun way is the key. So we just finished that as well, which is great.
Let's see. We got a question from Tim, actually. So let me pull this up real quick. Have any of the children brought up something to your attention that has helped the mission, or maybe an interesting fact about a native animal? I think
awesome for that too.
Quite a few.
Yeah, yeah. Kids are pretty awesome with that stuff. They're not shy to share it with you, which is great.
I know from our side in community and education outreach in Eastern and Southern Africa, the kids have identified methods or species of which are being taken, or they've raised concern about certain criminal activity that they've said that their community couldn't handle. That's definitely helped with like the law enforcement aspect and the transnational crime and different poaching activities. Lauren mentioned earlier the bear bile, which, that's a direct cause and effect. I mean, you can change a classroom worth of users for bear bile in a day, which is a direct impact to stopping bear bile use for those bears that are kept in captivity for that. And then, I mean, almost every time we have an education course, I can think of a specific thing coming forward. So another reason engaging the community is really important for our multifocal approach, because we're not going into any of these things blind. We sit back and research and communicate with communities and the local experts and develop these projects. And so when that information comes forward, we're ready to aid in the way that we can best after that information comes forward.
Yeah, I do want to highlight that one of the biggest reasons why the Wild Hand program was so exciting is because this team of volunteers chose schools that were really close to national parks, schools that were so rural that they might not have access to this information, but they need it almost the most because they're right there with these native animals that they might not know exist, that are extremely endangered, and that they might come across but might not have any idea as to what they are, what issues they're facing, and what they can do. So I personally love that about Wild Hand, all the rural schools that we touch to bring closer into the solution.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. The targeting the correct audience. That's the other thing. Like, you have these giant countries, these giant areas. It would be like the equivalent if you went to Los Angeles and you're trying to work on some waterfowl project that was, based in Texas. These countries are vast and densely populated, so we really need to be exact on where we approach them. And so that's, again, where we rely on our partners and our in-country folks to identify the best spots. We have Jamie Wilson. As a retired science teacher, how can I help as a retired science teacher help develop a curriculum? Mm-hmm. We will make sure, if you don't mind, shoot us a comment, direct message our page, and we can connect you with Lauren, because we're definitely not shy of making more projects and more education book lists and everything, which ties into Tim's question, which is statement. Love the activity book.
Guys, it's a great thing to do during quarantine.
Yes. So we have an activity book, which this would be something to be great to make more of them. Current activity book that we host is a buy one, give one. So anytime that's purchased, we have one printed and we hand them out in our education projects in Southern Africa. So yet again, another way to be involved. Digital interactive versions. We have Kahoots now, which is this cool program. So making some of those, refining some of those digital platforms allow us to connect immediately with any classroom. So Lauren can actually send a teacher in any country at any time a classroom's worth of access logins so that the students can take these quizzes and courses at their own pace. And they can be like hundreds of questions and slides long, but they can work on them at their own pace. And then we can revisit the slides that they didn't score well on or that they didn't understand. And you can embed videos and pictures and fun trivia games. So those are something that we are always looking to expand.
Yeah. We have another one coming up.
I was just double checking. I don't see another question, but guys, feel free to ask any questions while you have us.
Yeah, you know, back to that previous question of how you can help, always reach out to us. I mean, we're volunteer based. That's how we all started. We're just very passionate people in conservation. Join the team. One of my favorite things about GCF is we're real people. We're right here and we're at all those fundraisers. So getting to talk to us is very personable. We're super transparent in what we do. We want to collaborate. That's how you make the best products anyway. That's how you make the biggest impact. So talk to us.
Yeah, and we love, of course, too, specialist support of any kind. You know, the thing that gets hard for us is like, we may need to get a bunch of graphics made, or we may need to do a bunch of education content, but there's only so much time for us. And then funding becomes the other side of it. Do we have funds to match that? We got Dana Jones. Oh, good. I found you. Well, I'm glad you found us, Dana. and Jeffrey Allen, Carvish. Hey, Mike, us volunteers at the Safari Park miss your updates at our meetings. Keep up the good work. Hey, thank you for that. You guys can always ask me. Of course, same thing. You guys can also follow us. I'm comfortable if you guys follow me on social media. I practically am always sharing something coming through the ticker tape with GCF. But
he never sleeps.
What's that?
Said he never sleeps.
I rarely sleep, which really helps when getting stuff done.
Much more time in the day.
But I mean, when we've got team members in Asia and team members in Africa and projects across the entire globe, someone's always falling asleep while the next person's waking up. And so I'm always trickling onto the next thing. But yeah, I mean, feel free to connect with us, especially with the way we can run tech now. A lot of these programs have gotten a lot better a lot of these virtual and digital programs have gotten a lot better for us during COVID because so many people swapped to virtual that all these programs that conservationists were trying to use, which were like 1/4 of your need and then like trying to chip them together. Now a lot of them seem together a lot more like efficiently.
Yeah.
So yeah. Creature Cal, he said, cool. Thanks for joining in. And also thanks to Creature Cal. He was one of the fundraisers under the Rhino Conservation Challenge. So special shout out to you. Thanks for making that happen. And thanks for helping make educational content. He had taken some content and made his own expanded versions of those on his YouTube channel, which obviously, if you guys are looking to do that, you are more than welcome. Cool. He was saying you're welcome there. The nice thing about this broadcast is we can actually directly communicate with you guys on Facebook and our YouTube channel. So that's pretty cool. Again, like I said, if you haven't connected on all of our social media platforms, they all kind of offer a little bit different source of information. A lot of our archive videos are on the YouTube channel. And then Instagram's a lot faster to pick up kind of a per species per project update, whereas Facebook you kind of have to scroll and find it. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to connect. Oh, Tim is mentioning too. Tim has been a major supporter. He's on the team as well. He just actually got some canine plushes. So he's referring to this right here. You guys can actually visit our webpage or our online store. And one of the ways you can support is we have dedicated funding lines. So for education outreach, elephants, rhino, pangolin, African painted dogs, our canines, the ranger training programs, they all have dedicated links. But most recently, we just set up a brand new canine adoption kit that gives you a plush toy with all of our all of our canines in the option.
Super cute. And
yeah.
even if we're in lockdown, we're still hustling down here. There's a lot of things still going on. So
yes. Yes. So if we don't have any more questions, I'm going to double check real quick that we're not missing anybody else. So Dana Jones asking, where in Kenya are you working and with who? We have several reoccurring projects in Kenya. In the earlier years, we were working in Laikipia with the Loisaba Reserve. We also sponsored Ruteti and worked with the Twigo Lindsay, sponsoring ranger gear, ranger training, and joint operations, as well as camera trap funding and education outreach funding. More recently, we work with Kenyan Wildlife Service on ranger training programs. And then we also work jointly with Rabia Hewa, who is connected to multiple different private conservancies and national parks. And so we work with her to find the more rural teams to provide ranger training and gear supply. And ranger training is a varied court of programs, which includes field first aid training, advanced tracking, patrol structure and style, strategies, how to integrate technology like GPS, camera traps, and how to properly document. Are the products shipped in the USA? Yes, all of our products are shipped from San Diego for the online store. And most of that stuff is actually sourced here in the United States too. With the exception of we have handmade beaded jewelry from our local community projects, and we have handmade bracelets and a couple other artisan products that we bring across. But with the gap in this year causing all the travel lockdowns, we don't have as much of that stuff left. But I do believe we still have some of our hand beaded animals from our Nourish partnership just outside of the Kruger National Park.
Yeah, and those are really great. It not only empowers them to utilize your skills to bring in resources into their community, but it brings awareness to all of the species that are out there. So double whammy.
It's pretty cool. That particular project too. This the community center we partner with is just adjacent to the Kruger National Park on the northern side. That's called Nourish, and we've been with them since they kind of got started. And basically, we have multiple programs there, which include in-classroom days about wildlife education, game drives for kids who've never seen the actual wildlife, but they live there in Africa, just outside the reserves themselves. We have this beaded jewelry program, beaded animal program. And when we buy those, we buy at like such a big rate and so many at a certain time that it actually keeps their staff employed. So in the beginning it was one person, and now I think the shop's up to 8 or 9, and that keeps all those people employed. And then when we sell those products, just kind of like the activity book, which is a buy one give one, that funding goes into the community-based programs there, which, like I said, includes game drives, education outreach, and field trips to a couple other wildlife facilities that are there within about a 45-minute drive of them. So one's a reptile center and another one's a wildlife rehab facility. So we've got a wide mix of things. Not everything's going on at the exact same time. We work on different things throughout the year based on the needs of the regions and the best timing of the regions and when kids are in class and when they're not. So that's why you see kind of things rotate through with this education line too, and the education outreach. we provide food as well. So like in the Wild Hand program, school lunches and nutritious food is involved in the entire process. Not so much a problem in Vietnam for them to access their only healthy meal of the day, but very much so. It's a crucial piece to the puzzle in our Southern African projects, where this may be the only nutritious meal they get in a day that's balanced and full. And that's when they come to the Nourish Eco Village and they're working with, they're there learning under their teachers. They actually will get, food and uh, they're covered for the day, where their family might be working like the entire day and they're kind of left at home without any of that access. And we just actually sponsored 100 kids for the entire month of December into January. So I think we dropped that donation on December 9th. And so it'll basically be December 9th to January 9th, so that during the holiday season, the kids have food and access, and they can go to the Nourish facility even during the holidays to get food. So all of this kind of incorporates under that education outreach, conservation, community-based conservation efforts, so that we make sure that we're making a good inroad with community-based relations.
Yeah, not only are we teaching them about the animals and all of that stuff, but we're teaching them how to live a sustainable life, how to live in a healthy community with other people and with the animals. And that's how we're going to make that long-term change.
Yes. So Dana is asking a different question, but I don't mind taking this one. What is your stance on captive breeding of lions in South Africa? This has to be stopped. Yeah, we agree. Basically, not only has that been proven to be a terrible life cycle for those animals and leading into, there's just a myriad of issues. One, the confinement of the cats, the size of those pens, the terrible genetics, so that those cats really don't become like these champion, like wild lion genetics when if they get released. They are part of the cub petting process in tourist traps and tourist locations, and then canned lion hunting goes down into the line of the canned lion hunts, which is basically where these lions are in small paddocks. They're not in like the true wild, and a rich, wealthy hunter will hop on the back of a vehicle and they'll pay to shoot that cat. So that entire process is recently got exposed with bloodlines. So that's probably a really good thing to tune into to learn more about that. But we agree that that definitely needs to be stopped.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question so that we could educate on it.
Yes.
That's similar to a lot of the issues in, farming for particular animal parts. While that might flood the market and be a short-term temporary solution, it's not fixing anything long-term. Let's say that farmer stops. What's going to happen then? We're going to go to the wild counterparts. So being able to change the minds of people from the foundation is the only way that we're going to make that change for a long time.
Yeah, what we see too in trafficking and different poaching demands is where one species is exhausted, the next one gets picked up. So if we don't address the demand issue and the user's market, it's a chain effect. This species is gone, then it's to the next one. This one's gone, and then this is the faux product that adapts to that. So like tiger bones and lion bones being used in traditional medicines, that demand market circles back. If those aren't available, then other bones are used. It's just a vicious cycle that if it's not stopped and interrupted and truly fixed at the source, we don't end the chain of events that continues. And at the end of the day, that money is cycling, and it's not cycling in the conservation circuit at all. Mm-hmm. So it becomes something that we in the wildlife conservation realm, all the different NGOs and bodies of government that are working against that, take on a whole new fight. And so when we talk about demand and users, there's the potential for millions of users. And as the human population grows, if we're not reducing the users, we are way above the population statuses of any of these wild cats now. I mean, there are roughly 20,000 wild lions left. There's roughly 7,000 cheetahs in the wild left, or less, depending on the survey and census. There's less than 6,000 African painted dogs left. I mean, as the story goes, there are millions of people. And so if we can't curb this problem and demand, we are just flooding the last spaces of the wild, and we need to cut that out.
Yeah, and we totally get that education. In this facet of our work, it feels like you're fighting a losing battle a lot of the time, but that's why we approach within GCF as a multifaceted approach. We want to make sure that we hit all angles and support people from all areas so that they do feel supported and want to continue being conservationists.
So, Dana, I'm not sure if I understand your question all the way. You said with Chinese medicine, using all these animal parts, etc., how many people, i.e., do you think? I think you're saying, do you think are the younger generation?
Oh,
Oh, I get what you're saying.
yeah.
You actually don't see a lot of the real young population using it yet, but they're very much influenced by their parents and their grandparents. And the best way to relate that is if you're from the United States, if you get sick, chicken noodle soup, go straight to that. That's the home remedy. Lemon tea. Well, that's been passed on for generation to generation. Obviously, that doesn't have a negative effect in the wild per se, but these home remedies have been passed on for thousands of years. So breaking that young users chain, we are seeing that, especially in the bigger cities of China and Vietnam, specifically, they are very tuned in with being more engaged in conservation, and they are breaking that cycle. It's the rural communities that kind of fall into old ways, old life cycle situation, which is where, again, that's where like our Wild Hand project is at.
Yeah.
It's in the rural communities, because as every community gets more involved, educated, aware of all the global issues, you see them turning to help these things. But uh, if you were to put Hanoi in a cultural wildlife setting, understanding for education of what we would be, they're like maybe 20 years behind in Hanoi, like population wise for that. So like, you could ask everybody, probably almost everybody in the United States, and say, do you know what happens with ivory poaching and whatnot? And versus some of these other cultures, if you go and say, did you know that pangolin poaching is a problem? They go, oh, I didn't know penguins were, well, yeah, there's pangolin stuff, but I didn't necessarily know penguins are being taken. So we have another question. It's not, let me scroll here. When we see, as we have these past few weeks, that interventions such as dehorning rhinos in South Africa has not stopped poachers, they're still slaughtering them for very small amount left. Do you think we will ever reduce the demand? There has been years of education in communities. We're still losing ground. Yeah, I mean, so you have a really good point. Yeah, so recently, especially in the Greater Kruger area, I think last week it was 17 rhinos collectively between those northern areas had fallen and they were dehorned. I think when you have to really dial it in, realistically, the education efforts have really only been ramped up since probably 2013. And so if you look at things like fighting cigarettes and alcohol abuse and drunk driving and seatbelts and all those things, it does take longer, but that's the generational change. And no one thing is the silver bullet in conservation. We have to apply all these avenues at the same time. So dehorning is one avenue in wildlife conservation efforts to reduce the immediate threat, but that has to be partnered with multiple layers of anti-poaching. You can't just dehorn a rhino and expect it not to get hit by poachers. It does devaluate it for them, and it does lower the risk for that reserve. But if the reserve next door isn't dehorned, then the poachers will go next door, especially if that reserve doesn't have a robust anti-poaching unit. And I agree, we are still losing too many rhinos collectively. And we did see with the shutdowns this year, we did see a drop, but that was an artificial drop because of what basically international travel had done. Everything had froze for a while. So we still have to combat all these areas. And what we are seeing, especially with our projects, is kids are pledging to not use animal products, and they are pledging to become wildlife conservationists, ambassadors, scientists, the next generation. That's progress. And if they break the chain in their family lines, that's X amount of users in that, which also has to be paired with laws. We have to elevate international laws and the actual use of those laws in all these different countries as well, because there are a lot of gaps internationally, locally, and in these different nations that allow wildlife traffickers and criminals to get through without minimal punishment, even in the United States, which stands to be the third market for wildlife trafficking based items outside of the Southeast Asian markets. For that includes rhino horn, ivory, pangolin, which is, I mean, it's the United States, but it's because we don't have laws specifically addressing that. So when traffickers get caught, it's 6 months, 2 years. It's $100,000 penalty for something that they made $500,000 profit on. So it's a major effort, and basically my response is we got to keep going. We have to all keep going. We can't give up. Dana's asking, do you have any videos that are shared with the communities? We do. We have lots of cool videos. We really haven't been able to do much with those this year, but we have educational videos, and we do like these new Kahoot games we have, which are like interactive learning modules about each species. Jamie Whitson's asking, let me see that really quick. Are adults in Asian countries such as Vietnam and China also being taught about the depth poaching issues? Yes, they are.
Yeah.
There are multiple approaches to the demand countries. So we're not the only one working on this. This is our project, and there are others as well. But like if I were to use the one like with Jackie Chan and the demand reduction, Jackie Chan is one of obviously China's biggest celebrities, and he is doing these ad campaigns with other Chinese celebrities. And what it's actually doing is it's changing kind of more of that. Of course, it impacts the kids that look up to Jackie Chan, but it also impacts like the teenage and the young business owners. In some of these markets, these are what we call the Ferrari syndrome or the race car syndrome, where you know, you're a young up and coming businessman, or you're looking for status in your community, and instead of buying that expensive car or that Rolex, you show off by having the ivory on your desk, or the rhino horn shot at your board meeting, or you have rhino horn, you know, that you hand out to your business colleagues. These things are being broken with the addressing of the adults. Also, enforcement and the laws have to come into play too. Obviously, if it's not illegal and it's only, you know, inferred that you shouldn't do it, it's not going to stop everybody. So those things are coming to come to play. There's been a lot more progress, especially in the last 5 years, with a lot of those things, with the debunking of certain things in the Chinese medicine and cultural figures, big major people within the community standing up to say, don't do this, you're destroying wildlife. And there is a curve down. Again, though, we're talking about a country with millions of people, millions of potential users, so it has to be maintained. And then, of course, in our programs too, we have adults as well, and we have more volunteers, which came about from last year, which was kind of funny too, right? So we had like students from last year that wanted to be involved this year, and their parents, which, I mean, that's always inspiring for us.
You know what's really great is like in our Wild Hand programs, we would have even younger attendees coming to our class that we were not anticipating.
Yeah.
Because the kids went home and told their parents, and their parents were like, you know what? That's actually pretty great. You could have my other kid too. And we just keep expanding our classes. Remember, they keep bringing home this knowledge to their parents. So even if we can't teach them in a setting like we do our younger kids, it still gets passed on to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Emma. We appreciate your kind words. And if you hadn't heard in some of our other programs, we do have professional development programs for some of our conservation projects, which include working alongside our canine unit stuff and working alongside our mounted anti-poaching unit stuff, which is in rhino, elephant, giraffe habitat spaces in different parts of Southern Africa. So, and I guess that goes for, we maybe in the future, maybe we'll work something out for the Vietnam projects, but right now we've got to make sure it's completely under quality and doesn't derail in any way. So maybe in the future, there'll be field trips where you can shadow Lauren and the Wild Hand Wild Warriors team. So if anybody else has any questions, feel free to ask. We are just shy of an hour, but I'm happy to answer them. Myself working in anti-poaching and wildlife protection, wildlife trafficking investigations, and hands-on in these are different projects for the wildlife education outreach. I I'm not shy about answering this stuff. So, but
Yeah, it's a wealth of information. Pick his brain.
all right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, which that's totally fine, again, these will stay up on our Facebook and our YouTube channel, and then we will put them up onto the Instagram as well. And if you guys would like to connect with us in any other way, feel free to reach out to the page. If there's a delay there, it's because we're waiting to contact and connect through, but we're happy to talk to you further. Thank you, Emma. Appreciate that. Dana's asking, what is your presence in the U.S. government? I do see Department of the Humane Society of the United States. So I do a lot of different stuff for consulting with the United States government, primarily as an expert in wildlife crimes. Right now, it's just our admin and business team. However, we are looking on expanding different projects in the United States. Luckily, within the United States, though, there are a lot of really good projects already going and a lot of really well-backed and well-funded projects operating. So, yeah, you see, what is your presence? I see State Department. Yeah, so I've presented for the State Department, and I have also done several presentations that were satellite for the State Department as well. So I did the Washington D.C. Wildlife World Wildlife presentation in 2000, I think 17 or 18. It's all kind of a blur now, but I went out to DC and I spoke in front of all the different bureaus of of law enforcement and counterterrorism and counter this and all the different lobbyist bodies to discuss the extreme importance for the United States to be involved directly in international wildlife crimes, locking down world wildlife laws, and being a global leader in wildlife conservation initiatives. I do believe that, Dana. I can almost guarantee that with the new administration, I can say that for sure. I'll just say for the first time in the history of all of those World Wildlife Day presentations that are put on from the State Department in Washington, D.C., that was the first year the president did not attend it. Let's say the incumbent president did not attend it. So that was interesting, to say the least. But and the State Department wasn't able to put on the normal broadcast because the White House had not put on their normal show of broadcast yet, so they weren't allowed to be the first for the year. We have reached out in the UK. I have presented in the UK twice now. I'm always happy to reach out and do more in the UK. Last time I presented in the United Kingdom was for the International Rhino Conservation Conference that was at the Chester Zoo, which hosted an international body from all over Europe, UK, United States, Asia, and Africa. And I was talking about anti-pushing at that one as well. But there's always a wealth of information from multiple people from the field. And many of us are not shy about taking the time to kind of get that message out there from the ground and what needs to get done. And also kind of be the ones with the hammers that take on the hard information about we need to act now.
Mm-hmm. We love sharing our information and collaborating. We also visit schools here in the US to speak to classrooms when we can after lockdown. So yeah, please reach out if you want us to come visit, talk about whatever is best suited for your classroom, whether or not it's just the animals or our projects. Completely up to you. We're open and flexible.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. We had a really nice response tonight. I see a lot of likes on the post, which that's always cool to see. We started out with a lot of really nice comments and maintained a nice viewership throughout. And thank you guys all for your comments and questions. It definitely helps keep it more engaging and more fluid for us. So
yeah, thanks for supporting us, especially through this tough time, whether it's just tuning in or donating or sharing our stuff.
Like sharing posts, keep hopping on, commenting, whatever it is. I do that. So Emma says, I do that for a rhino conservation charity at the moment. I would, oh, awesome. Thank you. yeah, well, it's nice to meet you all tonight. And yeah, like I said, feel free to reach out to us again. And Stephen, thank you. Cheers to you too. I hope you're enjoying one of the GCF conservation brews there.
Yes. That sounds great.
So, oh, awesome. That's Emma's saying that she travels to schools, colleges, and universities.
Oh, that's great.
Awesome. There can never be too much fat. That's for sure. So, but yeah. So next up, we tomorrow are going to be putting out a edited and filmed interview, which will be myself and Natasha Frohlander, our GCF K9 project coordinator. And then I think after that, we have 2 more interviews left for the year, which is going to be with me and Chris Larson, our field first aid instructor for anti-poaching units. And that will also include our field journalist, Robert Pike. Expect that one to be comical, despite the serious topic. And then hoping to see our African painted dog coordinator on between now and sometime in the year. And I forgot also, our elephant project coordinator is going to run a live trivia next week as well at some point. Dates and times to be decided. Thank you, Chow. Appreciate you guys and the rest of the team. Keep up the great work. You guys are keeping us proud, but we can't join you. So we look forward to seeing you guys when the world opens back up for us all. All right, guys. Well, we'll catch you guys on the next one. We will see you guys soon, hopefully. Take care, guys.
Stay safe.